Hello mathematicians, today we are doing an exciting lesson. We are solving quadratic equations by using the quadratic formula. So far we have learned three methods: solving by factoring, solving by taking square roots, and solving by completing the square. This is our last and final method of solving by quadratic formula. The good news is that the quadratic formula method always works every single time. So if you are ever getting stuck and not sure which method to use, this one will always work. So a quadratic equation written in standard form can be solved using the quadratic formula. So we always need our equations to be in standard form to use the quadratic formula. The quadratic formula is x equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. Now when you look at this, you should see something that's familiar to you. B squared minus 4ac, that is the discriminant. And that is what we talked about in our last lesson. So, example 1 says solve each equation using the quadratic formula. So on this one, we have x squared plus 6x plus 8 is equal to 0. This is in standard form, so we can go ahead and start with step 1. Step 1 is to identify A, B, and C. And again, those A, B's, and C's come from your quadratic formula. A is the coefficient of x squared. In this problem, the coefficient of x squared is 1. B is the coefficient in front of x. In this problem, that is 6. And C is your constant. In this problem, that is 8. Now that we know our A, B, and C, we can go ahead and plug that into the quadratic formula. So we'll have negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4 times a times c all over 2 times a. So I've plugged in the numbers for a, b, and c inside of the quadratic formula. From here, we're just going to calculate this formula one step at a time. So the first thing that I am going to do is I'm going to calculate my discriminant. So I'm going to bring down the x equals negative 6 plus or minus, and right now we are going to calculate this number right here. So in my calculator, I'm going to do x squared. Oops. There we go. So I'm going to have 6 squared minus 4 times 1 times 8. And I'm going to type it in my calculator using all the parentheses that I have here. I am not including the square root symbol. I'm only doing the discriminant, the part that is underneath. And when you do that, you should get 4. In my denominator, 2 times 1 is 2. So that's step 2. All we did was calculate this number, underneath our square root symbol. Step 4 is to simplify the square root if possible. So on step 4, what we are doing is we're going to actually find the square root of 4. So if I bring down x equals negative 6 plus or minus, we're going to find that number in a second, and that will be divided by 2. So if you find the square root of 4 in your calculator, you will get 2. Our final step is to simplify. So from here, we have two different equations going on. We have negative 6 plus 2 over 2 and negative 6 minus 2 over 2. So again, we have one equation or one expression for the plus sign, and then we have another one for the minus sign. So let's go ahead and calculate these. Negative 6 plus 2 is negative 4. Negative 4 divided by 2 is negative 2. Negative 6 minus 2 is negative 8. Negative 8 divided by 2 is negative 4. So we have two solutions. Those two solutions are negative 2 and negative 4. So those are our answers. We are going to be doing these same 5 steps every time. So let's go ahead and look at another example. So those 5 steps, again, are written up here. So if you ever get stuck, refer back to those 5 steps. So step 1, we need to make sure, well, actually, like step 0, we need to make sure that it equals 0, and it does. So then I can go on to step 1, which is to identify A, B, and C. In this problem, A is 5, B is 4, and C is -3. So now I'm going to go ahead and plug this into the quadratic formula. So I'm going to have x equals -b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4 times a times c all over 2 times a. Now take a second, pause this video, make sure that you have written it exactly like I have. Notice how I've always written my A, B's, and C's inside of parentheses. You will want to do that too because you will make less mistakes if you do that. Notice how I have x equals and then I have my fraction bar, so the x equals is not a part of the fraction bar. Make sure that your -b and your plus or minus are also over your fraction bar, that you didn't accidentally start it over here. And make sure that your square root bar goes across all of your discriminant. Once you have that taken care of, we can start step 3, which is calculate the discriminant. So I'm going to have x equals negative times 4 is just -4, plus or minus the square root of. I'm going to calculate this discriminant in just 1 second. And then down here, 2 times 5 is 10. So now I'm going to calculate the discriminant. When I calculate this number, I am not typing in the square root in my calculator. I'm just typing in the numbers. When you type it in your calculator, use parentheses just like I have written it out. So I'm going to have 4 squared minus 4 times 5 times -3. If you have done that correctly, you will get 76. If you did not get 76, double check that you have used parentheses and that you have not used the square root symbol. So now we are on to step 4, which is to simplify our square root symbol. If you check in your calculator, 76 is not a perfect square. So because 76 is not a perfect square, we are going to have to use the birthday cake method to simplify the square root of 76. The smallest prime number that goes into 76 is 2. It goes in 38 times. The smallest prime number that goes into 38 is 2. It goes in 19 times. The smallest prime number that goes into 19 is 19. It goes in once. When you get to 1, you're done. That's the candle to your cake. So I have a pair of 2's that can leave the square root symbol. 19 does not have a pair, so 19 will stay inside of the square root symbol. So right now I have x equals -4 plus or minus. We simplified the square root of 76 and got 2 square roots of 19. And that's all over 10. -4 and 2 square roots of 19 are not like terms. I cannot add these together because this one has a square root and this one does not. So I cannot even subtract the 4 and the 2. I can't do anything else there. However, because all 3 of these numbers outside are divisible by 2, I can reduce this fraction by dividing by 2. So my answer is going to be x equals -4 divided by 2 is -2, plus or minus 2 divided by 2 is 1, so I'll have 1 square root of 19, divided by 10 divided by 2 is 5. This is as far as I can take this one. This is, in fact, my solution. I have two solutions here, negative 2 plus the square root of 19 over 5, and negative 2 minus the square root of 19 over 5. Let's go ahead and try example 3. On example 3, this is in standard form, so I can go ahead and begin identifying A, B, and C. Here A is 4, B is 8, and C is 8. So I'm going to have x equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4 times a times c all over 2 times a. Go ahead and pause the video. Make sure that you have written this formula the exact way that I have here. Do not be lazy with this stuff. You need to have everything in parentheses. Make sure your fraction bar starts after your equal sign and goes all the way to the end. Make sure your square root symbol goes across all of your discriminant. And then when you are ready, go ahead and resume the video. So if I start simplifying, negative times 8 is just negative 8 plus or minus the square root of. If I go ahead and calculate this discriminant here, I'm going to have, let's see, 8 squared minus 4 times 8. And I get, inside of my square root symbol here, negative 64 divided by 2 times 4 is 8. Now, when I go ahead and look at this, I have the square root of negative 64. If we go back up here and look at these problems, here my discriminant was 4. That's a positive number. So that told me I was going to get two real solutions, and I did. If we look at example 2, my discriminant was 76. That's a positive solution. That's a positive number. So that's telling me, again, I'm going to get two real solutions, and I did. If we look at this example here, for example 3, my discriminant is negative 64. What happens when your discriminant is negative? You'll have no real solution. There's nothing else that we need to do on this one. Whenever you get a negative underneath your square root symbol, you are going to get no real solution. And so then from here, you are done with this problem.